Hello. Okay. Welcome, honorable speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I, Mr. Rudranarayan Das, on behalf of the organizers, extend my heartfelt welcome to all to this international webinar. This Ranjitguru series of international webinar is an initiative by the Department of History and Political Science, Jawaharlal Nehru College, Cuttack, in a close collaboration with Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Odisha. I feel happy to express that we have successfully concluded the 110th round of panel discussion soon. In today's session, I feel extremely honored to introduce our guest speakers, so none other than Professor Xavier Lilienthal from Tashkent State University, Uzbekistan, Professor Sreenivasulu, NUJS, Kolkata, Professor Aparna Kulkarni from Xavier College, Mumbai, and our special guest is Professor Hadia Mukhtar and Professor Dilshod Umra from Uzbekistan, Tashkent, and Sydney, Australia, respectively. It's a pride privilege to host all of you, ma'am and sir. Friends, we are a largest content provider in 2020 YouTube channel, the Department of History and Political Science, JN College, Kuampal, Cuttack. And we are trying to make a policy dialogue in the vision of post-COVID situations in the earth, and universally we are trying to connect a different kind of research activities in India and Odisha, respectively. Thank you all. The broad theme of our international webinar is kept as Initiative Policy Dialogue 2020, COVID-19 and Life Practice Beyond Pandemic. Thank you. Now, I would like to invite Professor Sharat Pradhan to initiate a brief welcome address. Over to you, Professor Pradhan. Professor Sharat Pradhan, please start the welcome address. Hello.
Hello, I am audible. Hello.
Sir,
Hello.
you are not audible.
I'm not audible.
Okay, sir, start.
I'm audible. Hello.
Sir, yes, sir. Please. Yes, sir.
Good morning to all erudite participants, honorable guests, scholarly resource persons from reputed universities and academia, and friends from media. I, on behalf of Department of History and Political Science, Jawaharlal College, Cuttack, in association with Center for Adivasi Research Development, welcome you all to this intellectual platform to offer your valuable deliberation. At outset, I am thankful to Professor Dr. Hadia Mukhtar, Medical Director, Sydney, Australia, that you could find time to be with us in spite of.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Payar Agalwar for a short guest introduction.
First of all, a very warm greetings to one and all, and thanks Rudra sir for inviting me to introduce our honorable guest for today's lecture session. Today we have joined with us eminent guest speakers, Professor Gary Lilienthal, Professor N.S. Sreenivasulu, Professor Aparna Kulkarni, and our special guest as attendee, Professor Hadia Mukhtar and Professor Dilshod Umarov. I am very delighted to introduce our guest speakers for today's session. Our first guest speaker is Professor Gary Lilienthal, Tashkent State University of Law in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. He holds a Sydney University Law degree, a Sydney College of Law Graduate Diploma in Legal Practice, a Melbourne Master degree, and a Perth, Australia Doctorate degree. A great academician, for his academic achievements knew no ends. He has widely published internationally with over 75 scholarly publications. Around 23 of his publications are indexed by ISI and Scopus International Accreditation Body. He also chairs the Carrington Rand collaboration of some 60 scholars from around the world. Really, sir, we are quite delighted by your presence. Sir will put his insights on legal history of pandemic. Our next guest speaker is also the key advisor of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Odisha, is Professor N.S. Sreenivasulu. He is currently serving as a Professor of Law, National University of Juridical Sciences, Kolkata. He is also a member of International Council of Jurists, London. We welcome you, sir. Your topic, as suggested by you, is Law, State, Health, Governance and Policy, Predictions, Realities Beyond Pandemic. Last but not the least, our guest speaker is Professor Aparna Kulkarni, Department of Economics, St. Xavier College, Mumbai. An excellent teacher, an excellent economist too, having 5 years of experience and several research publications in journal has added to her academic credit. Recently, in an indie journal, she has expressed her opinion regarding the topic, is the L-shaped recovery curve evident in India? Ma'am, we welcome you too for today's lecture session. Ma'am, your topic is Political Economy of COVID-19, Vaccine Research, Issues and Challenges. I am also quite delighted to inform our participant that we have special guest to join all of us, Professor Hadia Mukhtar. She is a medical doctor, Sydney, Australia. Ma'am, thanks a lot for connecting with us. And we have also joined with us Professor Dilshad Umarov as a special guest. He is a deputy rector at Tashkent State University of Law, Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Thanks everyone for joining with us. Now, after this brief introduction, I would like to stop here and invite Professor Gary to please initiate his talk. Over to Professor Gary. I will be requesting Professor Gary to please.
Thank you, Professor Payal. Do we have my PowerPoint to put on the screen?
Yes, sir, we are just starting it.
Okay, thank you. What a lovely introduction. Thank you very much for that. I'm hoping everybody can understand my very bad foreign accent today. Okay, here we go. Can you put it onto the slideshow?
Yes, sir, we will do as per your.
We're almost ready. While they're getting that ready, I'll just explain to everyone. This, first of all, I'm coming to you from a little country town in Australia, about 2 hours west of the federal capital, Canberra. And I'm in my dining room now, very comfortable, speaking to you all. Today, we're going to look at research that I completed over the last few months, entitled Anti-Pandemic Legal Rules. It's a legal history of what legal responses have taken place in times of pandemics. It actually forms a 10,000 word paper that's going to be published in my forthcoming book called Human Capital and Development, on the basis that pandemics and the laws that are developed to control pandemic situations are a human capital response by governments. Now we're on slide 2. We could probably start with that. Can everybody see the PowerPoint now? I hope you can. So let's start with slide 2. So in May 2020, Rajasthan authorities in India acted against more than 1,300 people for violating anti-pandemic rules relating to COVID-19. And these rules provided for mandatory quarantine. Actions by authorities included fines or even filing a first information report for a cognizable offence. In other words, they arrested them for a criminal offence for breaching border conditions. Migrant labourers and others returning to Rajasthan must enter compulsory 14-day quarantine. And this is the same all around the world these days. However, many have breached this and other medical protocols. People don't like it. And we see it on the news from America, the way people react very strongly against the medical regulations that the government there has brought in. If medical officials detected any symptoms in these people, then the person was sent compulsorily to institutional quarantine. Rajasthan now has more than 10,000 institutional quarantine centres. Thus, the pandemic arises at borders. The pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, arises as an issue at borders, which means it's a jurisdictional issue. In this way, containing human capital. Borders contain human capital, necessarily involving other countries and suggesting that we need a comparative analysis because multiple jurisdictions are involved. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, having just set out the significance of this research, we need to formulate an objective. How do we narrow it down? How do we do a cogent research project? You can't just research all the pandemics. We have to narrow it down. So, having thought this through, the objective of this research is to examine critically the genesis of this form of medical regulation arising during times of pandemic disease. So we look using a kind of a psychoanalytic method at the history of the situation, and from that we can postulate what the underlying norms are. Next slide, please. So that ordinance in Rajasthan was made by the governor, and it was entitled An Ordinance to Consolidate the Laws Relating to the Regulation and Prevention of Epidemic Disease and for Matters Connected Therewith or Incidental Thereto. The Rajasthan State Legislative Assembly was not in session. However, the governor of the state of Rajasthan was satisfied that it was necessary for him to take immediate action in respect of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thus, the governor exercised the powers granted to him in the Constitution of India to promulgate a suitable ordinance. This ordinance empowered the government to prohibit, restrict, inspect, seal borders, prescribe social distancing, and such other medical measures as might have been necessary for regulating and preventing epidemic diseases, and arguably conform to the binding international law of the International Health Regulations of 2005. So we have here a governor making an order without the conformance of the legislature, and it's a very strong ordinance with many prohibitions, and you can see that many people are going to be saying that their rights are being transgressed. What kind of rights? Two kinds of rights. Their fundamental rights, they will claim, are being transgressed, and also their human rights, which are a form of rights held in trust by statement from the United Nations. So that forms part of the literature. Next slide, please. Next slide. The International Health Regulations, 2005. Oh, next one, back one, please, to slide number 5. Wonderful. The International Health Regulations of 2005 were derived from the International Sanitary Regulations, which were adopted at the 1851 International Sanitary Conference in Paris. The International Health Regulations 2005 now purport to prevent, protect against, control, and provide a public health response to the international spread of disease in ways that are commensurate with and restricted to public health risks and that avoid unnecessary interference with international traffic and trade. So here we have the issue. There's a dichotomy between people's health and somebody else's trade. And we'll see as we go through this presentation that the one doesn't necessarily coincide with the other. And the big policy problem is how to fix the trade problem and how to fix the health problem at the same time. I know that this conference is thinking about policy, and I'm sure that they'll take this into account. In this way, government has authorized medical officials to run the fight against the pandemic, suggesting what we call a medicalization of the government's response, thus confining its human capital to jurisdictional containment. It's almost as if that we have installed a form of administration that's run by the doctors, and of course, we're not being doctors, we don't understand their reasoning, so there's going to be a difficult response. Thank you. So let's look at the lens of this research. This is doctrinal research, and so it needs a lens. There's no interviews here. It's all library doctrinal research. So in 1983, the scholar Zola had defined medicalization as a process whereby more and more aspects of daily life have come under the control, the influence, and the supervision of medicine. Others have described medicalization as a process in which largely social problems were reframed by defining and treating them as medical or even pathological problems. Addiction, arguably, is one of those. The professionalization of physicians was within public health policy when a need was seen for a technical device to manage the larger social body. In his essay on Foucault's works, De Vittorio showed that, in the frame of public health, a body of medical administrative knowledge developed within medicine for managing social danger that could destroy or decay human capital seen as a pathological risk. Next slide, please. Now, you will recognize this as a slippery slope argument. This slippery slope argument was the basic rationale for medicalization. So the slippery slope argument is, unless we get the doctors to control the situation, everyone will get sick and die. That's a slippery slope argument. Or the social control of undesirable behaviors. This was a pathologization of existence, where medicine took over through an administrative process to manage people's daily lives. It could be exemplified in cases of the elderly, consuming more than 6 prescription drugs daily, or of children being given Ritalin because of unaccepted conduct in the school classroom. Medicalisation appears as social control comprising 3 levels of control. And this is Zola's research. Conceptual in the form of discourse and the adoption of an ideology that strengthens its social acceptance. Institutional in terms of physicians' roles in organisations and the management of psychosocial problems. And interactive, the private relationship between doctor and patient. Medicalisation of the control of the pandemic appears to have adopted all 3 levels of control, thereby taking over control of the country's human capital in order to prevent its decay of human capital. And by the way, in my country here in Australia, thank you for changing the slide. In my country, there's a statute called the Biosecurity Act, and the Governor General declared a state of emergency, which created a new national cabinet, which has no constitutional basis. And they've been ruling the country all year without any constitutional grounding. So this is a serious change in governance. And all the way around the world now, we're seeing this happening. So from that literature review, and from that initial understanding, and from understanding the lens of medicalisation, our research question arises. And the question is whether the state response to pandemics has been medicalised. And if so, in what ways? It's all very well to postulate medicalisation and then intuit that that's what's happened, but you can't do that. You have to ask whether or not it has happened. Argument seeks to demonstrate that early regulatory and legislative responses had derived from fears of otherness or alterity arising from alchemical medical metaphors. Necessarily alchemical because early medical metaphors were indeed arguably derived from alchemy. And this allowed states to govern by conferring sweeping administrative powers onto qualified medical officials. And those are the times in which we are living now. Next slide, please. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this. For those of you not from the legal field, we apologise, we lawyers apologise, because our methodology is pretty much always the same. It's always doctrinal, it's library research, and we don't go out and interview people and we don't collect data. So that's the research paradigm and methodology for this research. Next slide, please. And we'll move on past this one as well. Let's go to slide 11. Slide 11. Good. These are the likely outcomes of the research. We'll actually look at some of the metaphors that control people in times of pandemic and understand how it's been done. You'll find it very interesting. But now I'm giving you a snippet of what the end product of the research is likely to be. So the research outcomes are likely to show that Fracastoro's alchemical formulae, Fracastoro was a famous doctor in Italy. You'll see later that he conspired with the Pope to manipulate huge amounts of people. Fracastoro's alchemical formulae for opposing seedlets by antipathetic means inferred the seminal bases for future legislation. So Fracastoro invented the concept of contagion. And he got it from an ancient scholar called Isidore of Seville, who arguably got it from even more ancient scholars, who the research doesn't mention. It's obviously a very ancient idea. The merely apparently true 542 CE Acts of Justinian, Emperor Justinian of the Eastern Roman Empire, had established a system of otherness by which pandemics could be controlled in the minds of the masses. You control pandemics by convincing people of which groups of people they should be afraid of. You understand that that's a form of alterity. Fracastoro demonstrated to the Pope of the time, in the 1500s, that his alchemical metaphor of contagion could physically move or herd, just like farming animals, an entire papal conclave. He succeeded in moving all the cardinals of the papal conclave from one city to another, scaring them with his metaphors. The international sanitary conferences confirmed already developing national rules into and summarizes all the research. Now we'll do a little bit of the body of the research paper, not all of it. We don't have that kind of time, just a few slides, maybe 20 slides, and then we'll do the conclusion, and then you'll have it in a nutshell. In this research, arguably, there's enough information for you to formulate policy, to present to the government, and I know that's what you're trying to do out of this conference, which is a wonderful idea. The governments apparently don't seem to understand, and we see a lot of evidence in the last 1,000 years that governments rarely understand pandemics. So Fracastoro developed an alchemical theory of contagion, and he did it through a number of metaphors. Because when you manipulate large populations via oratory, you do it through the principles of ancient rhetoric, and it works every time. All the kings of the world do it, the prime ministers of the world do it, the presidents do it. It's a workable idea to use what we call epideictic rhetoric, the rhetoric of the king, and it sways people. It's very plausible. So Fracastoro expressly compared the behavior of particular contagions to the actions of poisons. Everybody understood poisons, so that was something he could use to compare contagions to. Or even the deadly Catoblefa, which was a mythical animal whose gaze many believed was fatal. So this was a mythology, a classical device of mass rhetoric. Everybody apparently at his time knew about this mythical animal, the deadly Catoblefa, and if you saw it, you died. It's believable because you can't ever meet anyone who's ever seen it, because obviously they're dead. So it must be true. And that kind of reasoning is very plausible to people. Fracastoro believed in the existence of a mythical animal which was taxonomically designated Catoblefa, whose gaze was supposed to kill from 1 mile away. He believed there was a kind of ophthalmia, a disease of the eyes, whereby the sufferer could infect anyone who looked at him. In other words, based upon the myth, he said that the mythical animal must have some kind of ophthalmia that could affect people a mile away. And if the animal could do it, then human beings could do it too. And that obviously is believable to people. Next slide, please. Let's look at the second metaphor. So that's very small print. I apologize for that. The initial 2 books of Fracastoro's book, De Contagione, contained a general theory for contagion, particularized in a discussion of several different contagious maladies. The 3rd book was about treatment and cure. The treatise began by defining contagion using Isidore of Seville's definition. that seem to have first arisen around 636 CE. Now, if you're interested in the history of pandemics and contagion, there's no better place for you to start in your research than the works of Isidore of Seville, a very great scholar at the apex of two cultural systems converting from one to the other. He was the great scholar of those days. Next slide, please. Now, the third metaphor, Fracastoro's term for the transmission intermediary of an infected substance from a sick person to a healthy target, was called fomes, F-O-M-E-S. This word was a theological term, apparently gotten from the church, for the small portion of original sin remaining after Christian baptism. So contagion is apparently a Christian concept, foreign to me because I'm not a Christian, which might burst back into the fire for a desirable object. In this context, fomes literally meant tinder or wood chip. You know that little pieces of wood, and if you throw in a spark of fire, boom, it catches fire, suggesting a metaphoric allusion to an increase in fire. And this is convenient rhetoric, isn't it? Because every mother knows that when a child is sick, she feels here and his body is hot. So it's a convenient metaphor. This disease, once inside the patient, acted like tinder, magnifying the evil that's already in the person until others could catch it. So the sick person is lying on the bed, you feel the person's forehead, it's hot, and you think, oh, the fire is increasing, obviously other people are going to get burnt by this fire. That's the metaphor. Fracastoro divided contagion into three categories: contagion through direct contact, contagion through indirect contact by fomites, which are obviously some kind of particles that carry the fomes, and the third one is contagion at a distance, arguably using the catoblefa metaphor. He appears to have been the first to employ the term fomes. Appears, but I've found there are earlier uses of it, for that substance adhering to intermediary substances and naming the transferred infecting agent as seedlets of contagion, seminaria contagiona. So he developed this theory based upon rhetoric and gave these particles a Latin name, which makes them believable. Fracastoro used the word in its normal meaning of tinder in his book on syphilis, which, being a serious disease, people took very seriously when they read it. And this would appear to be the meaning also in other parts of his work. The sudden appearance of the word in his Trattato implies that Fracastoro had already adopted it elsewhere as a technical term, probably in a lost section dealing with the principles of contagion. Next slide, please. So let's see how all this was elaborated. Let's just stop for a moment. What we have now is a rhetorical scaffolding, an infrastructure set up by a doctor using alchemy, using mythology, and using some philosophies gained from philosophers from former ages. And it's obviously very convincing to people. So, oh, I can see a very young student there. A young man is listening. That's very good. How old are you? About 5? Doesn't want to say. Okay. So by the late 1530s, Fracastoro succeeded in elaborating how these seedlets infected according to their many fundamental properties. Just listen to this, you'll be amazed. The combination that comprised the seedlets had to be both strong for a successful transfer and viscous like honey, for adhering to the intermediary. Obviously, you can't infect someone else unless you have viscosity, so you can adhere to whatever's taking it to the other person. Seedlets infecting at a distance needed a very strong combination and an increased intricacy to penetrate the target. Some seedlets multiplied until the entire mass of humours was affected. Humour theory originally argued several models with 2, 3, or 5 components. The most famous was the 4 humours model of Hippocrates, later elaborated by Galen. These are famous medical people. These 4 were black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood, each corresponding to one of the 4 temperaments of sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. For Hippocratic medicine, these 4 humours had to be in balanced amounts and strengths, balanced amounts and strength for a healthy body. Their imbalance and separation leading to disease. So obviously, if you're going to transmit on a fomite a poison that will imbalance these humours, you're sick. A very plausible mythological theory of contagion. This suggested that seedlets separated the humours, causing imbalance. Next slide, please. Now, very soon I'm going to go faster because I only have another few minutes to speak. I've been asked to speak only for 45 minutes, which is a terrible problem for me. I prefer to speak for many hours. Quarantines derived from a certain applied belief in contagion as the cause of certain epidemics. This origin was traced back as far as 1545 and attributed to an intrigue practiced at the Council of Trent by Pope Paul III. Listen to this. This is how you can use contagion. The Pope wanted to remove the assembled conclave of cardinals to the city of Bologna, where his supremacy was unquestioned. He commissioned the cardinal to spread a report that a febrile contagion was spreading in Trent. This report was drafted with the connivance of the eminent physician Fracastoro, discussed before in our discourse. No doubt members of the conclave feared personal putrefaction as their humours attempted to rebalance. Cardinals fearing their humours attempting to rebalance. Let me ask you this, everyone. Have you ever walked down the street and been afraid of an imbalance in your humours? Probably not. Other fears probably are paramount. So this alchemical theory was now capable of physically moving an entire conclave of cardinals, a conclave being a meeting of governance, suggesting its power to command obedience. Now, let's just move on here to slide 23, please. Slide 23. We're going to jump over the section on the plague of Justinian of 542 because the research shows that even although everyone thinks there was a plague of Justinian, and the record tends to show that the emperor himself was sick with the plague, that he used the plague to mobilize his armies and conquer more territories. But the research actually doesn't have sufficient documentary evidence to prove that that plague ever took place or that Justinian ever did any such thing, even although there's rhetoric in all the books that suggest it. So here we are on slide 23. And I want to show you that England had an ancient system called the denizen system. Anybody who came to England from another country had to stay in a hotel for 40 days. And they were supervised by the publican, the person who owned the hotel, and reported to the local police people. This was automatic. And they weren't allowed to trade, and they weren't allowed to have social relationships unless supervised by this hotel in which they stayed. So England had for at least 800 or 900 years a system whereby any foreigner coming into the country was supervised for 40 days. Ladies and gentlemen, they had automatic quarantine. Because when we look at the derivation of the word quarantine, it means 40 days. So anybody coming from another country whose social status wasn't fitting obviously had to be quarantined for 40 days. I don't know what the situation is like in India right now, but I hear there are 40,000 of our citizens from Australia, and the government won't let them back into the country, even although they're citizens. This is most unusual move. Now let's go to slide 26, please. 26. Thank you very much. So along with instituting medicalization, which Fracastoro had done at the Papal Conclave, the first of 14 international sanitary conferences began in Paris in 1851. And you can see on the screen where they took place. And all the political maneuvers took place. The record is all there, you can see it. And they argued all the issues of control of contagions using Fracastoro's principles, using principles of medicalization to supervise, and what came out of it was a convention, an international convention that's remarkably similar to today's international health regulations of 2005. Now let's have a look at slide 28. We're almost finished. Slide 28. Senior judges around the world were aware that governments were extinguishing people's rights in the interests of medicalization. So in the Italian city of Siracusa, they met and they generated what's called the Siracusa Principles. And on the screen, I have the two main principles, clearly being disregarded in our times. But this is what these international judges said. 1, public health may be invoked as a ground for limiting certain rights in order to allow a state to take measures dealing with a serious threat to the health of the population or individual members of the population. These measures must be specifically aimed at preventing disease or injury or providing care for the sick and injured. Now, if you go back to the second line, first word, the key term is limiting. You're not allowed to extinguish rights, but you can limit them. And keeping 40,000 citizens out of the country indefinitely is a virtual extinguishment of the right of a citizen to live in his or her own country. So that's arguably a breach of the Siracusa Principles. So in generating policy or a recommendation to the central government in Delhi, I would argue you'd want to remind them of the Siracusa Principles. The second one, due regard shall be had to the international health regulations of the World Health Organization. Now, we have seen in the United States over the last year that the government of the United States and their president, Mr. Trump, getting very angry with the World Health Organization and singling out Dr. Tedros, a very exalted medical practitioner from the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, not far from you. And by the way, I have taught there in that country. And the United States tried to defund the WHO. They attacked Dr. Tedros, and they even alleged that other countries were manipulating the World Health Organization. And when I looked at it, I couldn't see that the World Health Organization was doing anything except conforming to the international health regulations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on slide 29 is our research extended synthesis, which I've already read to you. It came at the end of the introduction. We've almost finished. Here it is. Fracastoro's alchemical formula for opposing seedlets by antipathetic means inferred the seminal bases for legislation. The merely apparently true 542 CE Acts of Justinian established a system of otherness by which pandemics could be controlled in the masses. Fracastoro proved his alchemical metaphor of contagion could move an entire papal conclave, thus firmly establishing his views. The international sanitary conferences confirmed already developing national rules into an international order of medicalization, later to become the International Health Regulations 2005. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my remarks. I hope you've enjoyed the research. Back to you, Professor, please.
Thank you, Professor Gary.
Yes? Back to you, Professor Payal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Gary, for your excellent deliberation and your elaborate lecture on the very said topic. Thanks a lot again, sir. Now, I would like to invite Professor Aparna Kulkarni to please initiate her talk. Over to Aparna, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, madam.
Am I audible? Good morning. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gary, for this enlightening presentation. And I really feel nervous. Like after listening to him, I don't know whether I could add something to the deliberations that we are currently having. Okay. So the topic that is given to me for the session is the international political economy of COVID-19 research. So here, as for the topic that I have chosen, I will be dealing with the international scenario as well as some domestic concerns that we have regarding the COVID-19 vaccine research that is going on. So as of now, if you just look at the scenario that is existing, we understand that there are many countries that are putting in hard efforts for inventing the vaccine, and the main purpose behind this kind of research is the humanitarian approach, because all of us know that this COVID-19 has created a great challenge for the existence of human beings on this planet, and it's really very difficult situation for all of us that we are going through. So therefore, the research on COVID-19, it has become a dire need, and there are many countries which are putting in efforts to invent a vaccine, and India is one of them. So if you just compare the international scenario with the domestic one, then there are certain things that we can observe. So there are some realities, some facts related to that. And also the most important factor that is influencing this kind of research is about the political economy angle. Okay, so that when I was thinking about this topic, I understood that the medical research that is going on for the invention of the vaccine is on the one hand, but on the other hand, the topic that is influencing, the factor that is influencing this research is about the political economy and the priorities that different political parties and political leaders have, and how they are influencing this kind of research. So first of all, we need to understand one fact that the research on vaccine and inventing a regular medicine for COVID-19 are two different things. So right now, currently, we are looking at the invention of a vaccine so that we can have a universal vaccination at different places, and that is how we can protect ourselves from COVID-19. So then, when we look at the political economy angle, we all know that political economy is a kind of area that is affecting the economic policies that we implement and how we execute the policies. Therefore, when I was thinking about this topic and I was doing a bit of research on this, I kind of came across certain things, both internationally as well as nationally, and based on that, I kind of made a paper on that, which I have recently published in one of the journals. So I would just like to elaborate on what I have researched on this particular topic. So, sir, can I present? I mean, can I show the slides here?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, actually, I need permission to start the screen share. So, Rudra sir, if
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can start.
Ma'am, there is no issue. You can start the PPT.
no, I still need permission. I think you have not checked that option. It is still checked. So you need to uncheck it so that I can start. No, still
Ma'am,
I.
if you can send the PPT to us, we can do that. I don't know if there is some technical error, I guess.
Okay, so you want me to mail the PPT?
I'm just sending the mail ID. You can send that your PPT, that mail ID. We can do that.
So can you just give me the email ID here?
Yes, ma'am. In the chat box, it has been given by Mr. Shubham Das.
Okay, okay. It will take a half of the minute, just one. I have sent the PPT to you, ma'am. With, I mean, the email ID that you have provided.
Professor Kulkarni.
Yes,
we
ma'am. We
can't
are just
see
checking
you.
within a couple of minutes.
Yes, sir. I will turn on the webcam.
Okay.
Payal ma'am, have you received the PPT?
Yes, ma'am. We have got it, and we are just doing that.
Yeah.
Is the PPT visible to everyone?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just wait a couple of minutes.
Oh, I can see it.
Is the PPT visible now?
Yes, yes, it is visible.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. We will change the slide as per your request.
Yes, yes. So we can go to the next slide now, because I have already told about my topic. So we can go to the next slide. I think now I am visible as well as audible.
Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, so as I have introduced my topic, I'm going to talk about the international political economy of COVID vaccine research and the challenges and issues that we are facing. So first of all, before I go to the international scenario as well as domestic scenario regarding the vaccine research, let me also briefly take you through what political economy is all about. So many a times we think that the human society that we have, it is influenced by political factors. There are economic policies, and also there is societal structure and social issues that we face. But then, if we just isolate all of them, if we just look at them in isolation differently and we just separate it, I don't think that we can have a holistic view or a kind of comprehensive picture to understand that. So that even though it looks that we have got three main domains of human life, that is polity, economy, and society, it is really very important to look at them with a holistic approach, or we need to look at them as a whole. So that if you just look at this pie chart, you understand that though it looks like three different domains we have, but still we have to have a holistic approach to look at them. So then economy or economics cannot be separated from polity or the societal framework that we have. So then all of them are together, all of them make a kind of mixed impact, combined impact on the on human life. So as I belong to the field of economics, I will be talking more of economics than society or social issues than the political issues. But I will be definitely covering how political factors and the societal factors, social issues are affecting the economic policies. Now the other thing is, when we were kind of going through the lockdown periods after the pandemic outbreak was experienced, and then because of the lockdowns, countries like India have seen the exodus of the reverse migrants and how people went back to their villages and they were literally walking on streets. This was actually a failure of the economic policies of the government, because without any properly planned lockdown, it was haphazardly imposed on the country, and there was no planning at all, and there was no consideration of the migrants which are living in metropolitan cities like Mumbai or Delhi, etc. So that because of the lack of planning, these people, they were not left with any other option but to leave that particular city, and they started walking back. So then it shows how our policies are literally imposed on the people, and how policies, they lack the proper planning. So therefore, when we look at the policy of lockdown and how we have implemented, how we were trying to control the outbreak of this pandemic, we understand that the reverse migration that has happened during the country and the resource loss that people have experienced, that has created a huge impact on the economic prosperity and the economic productivity of the people. Now, given this particular point, sir, can we go to the next slide? Given this point, that is how economic policies were prepared, and then the government came up with the Atmanirbhar Bharat package and the kind of self-reliance scheme that government was expecting to implement. At that time, in the first quarter of this financial year, here I'm going to give you the scenario that is related to India. So then there were some major concerns that we need to understand. So the first quarter, considering the main indicators like GVA, GDP, and inflation, these macro indicators have shown dismal performance, disappointing performance of Indian economy in the first quarter of this financial year. And then, like other countries, even India has faced GDP contraction. So GDP fell down. Actually, it is GVA. So GVA at basic prices, it fell down by minus 22.8%, and GDP at the constant prices, it fell down by minus 23.9%. So after this drastic impact on the productivity and the manufacturing sector, it was it was a devastating kind of situation, because there was highest rate of unemployment in the country. People were not having the resources, and except agriculture, manufacturing and services sector, it felt the huge impact. It felt the pinch of that lockdown period. Actually, I should say series of lockdowns in India at different places. So there was a national lockdown for around 75 days, and after that there were local lockdowns that were imposed on the society. Therefore, with this GDP contraction, which was the highest as compared to other countries, because of this, there was a huge economic loss that our country has faced. And apart from the manufacturing related indicators over here, if you go to inflation, if we consider the main indicators of inflation here, which are CPI, Consumer Price Index, and CFPI, which is Consumer Food Price Index, both in the rural background as well as in cities in the country, will understand that the inflationary numbers are also showing the similar trends. So inflation, it was out of control, and even though India adopted flexible inflation targeting policy, it was not possible for the government and even the central bank of the country, RBI, to control the inflation. So in rural parts as well as in cities, the inflation was out of control. If you look at the first figure over here, that is CFPI in rural parts as well as in the cities, it is around 10%. So we have nearly felt double-digit inflation growth in the first quarter of this financial year, and it was because of the supply shocks. It was because of the disruption of the supply chain management that has taken place during the lockdown period. And also, it was not just the supply side that was responsible for this kind of inflation, but even the demand side factors were equally responsible, because people had lost their purchasing power, and when people have no purchasing power, they stop demanding, and it will then have the spiral effect. So if there is no demand, then there will be production pessimism. Once that production pessimism takes place, then there will be employment loss, and as a result of employment loss, there will be production pessimism in the form of losses in stoppage in the production process. So that is how demand and supply, both side factors, they were responsible for the inflationary scenario in the country. And in Indian context, it is a very specific fact that when you just dichotomize the inflationary numbers, that is the consumer price index in general and consumer food price index, which is specific to the food items, in case of CFPI, which is food price index, we have a concept of dual inflation. That is, there are at least two commodities which are responsible for the high inflation rate. And many a times it is found that the dual inflation, it exists because of the cereals and all. Because as all of us know, that in agriculture sector there is a lot of uncertainty and there are supply side related constraints, so that in case of cereals or some food grains, the food price index is always high, and the agriculture sector, because of the low productivity of Indian agriculture sector, we are not yet able to sort of come out of that trap that agriculture sector has. So because of this duality of the inflation in food prices, the purchasing power that many of the rural people have, that purchasing power is not enough to command over their basic needs. And it has been highlighted by the lockdown period how rural people and also people, urban poor especially, how these people have lost their purchasing power and how inflation has affected them. So the three main macro indicators over here, that is manufacturing, GVA and GDP, and third, the inflationary scenario, both in terms of consumer price index and consumer food price index. All these main indicators show the dismal performance of the country in that lockdown period, and also what has happened post the lockdown when it was gradually lifted up. Currently, in the second quarter of our financial year, GVA at basic prices, it has shown slightly better performance. Okay, so at present, the GVA at basic prices, it is minus 7%, whereas GDP at constant prices is minus 7.5%. So it is still in the negative territory, but of course, as compared to the previous financial quarter, our situation is better in the second quarter, and we are expecting that in next to next financial year we will be having the positive growth rate, both in terms of GV at basic prices as well as GDP at the constant prices. And of course, when both of them start recovering, then the inflationary numbers will also show the better performance. So then around double digit inflation rate, that won't be existing when the manufacturing indices, they start showing the better performance. So with this expectation, when we understand this economic impact on society of the lockdown, etc., it is possible to go to the next topic, next issue of this kind of economic impact. Can we go to the next slide? The finance ministry, and it is related to the taxation and the public expenditure. As fiscal policy maker, government actually has given quick responses to the pandemic, and the major indicator of fiscal policy response is in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme or Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana. As a part of this Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, the main focus the poor people, which is always a concern for the policymakers in India. Along with that, there were several provisions made for the MSME, that is medium, small, and other enterprises that are there. It was found during the lockdown period that large industrial houses, they were still able to maintain their economic viability. Uh, but then services sector and the MSMEs, they are hardly hit by the pandemic. So then for MSMEs, small and medium sector enterprises, heavy provisions were made under Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, and they were given tax concessions. In some cases, government has changed the definition of MSMEs completely. And along with that, there are certain other packages and the credit provisions that government has made as a part of this plan. And of course, another heavy provision as a part of the scheme is the major budgetary allocation for the MG Narega, which is Mahatma Gandhi in the rural parts of the country. And this was also continued as a part of this Atmanirbhar Bharat package, and government rather has allocated more allocation for this MG Narega scheme. So then these fiscal policy measures, it was argued that because of all such measures, it will happen that the fiscal deficit and the pressure on the government's revenue, that will increase, and therefore how the government will be able to maintain the limit of that fiscal deficit. But actually, economic theory or economic logic is on one side, but the humanitarian approach and the response from the government, it was on the other side. So then government chose to become a deficit government, and as a part of that deficit creation program, government has created huge impact by having this fiscal policy and this kind of economic relief package for the poor people, especially in the rural background, as well as some different programs in the cities as well. So this was the response from the fiscal policy maker, and this relief package, it was given in 3 stages. Coming to the monetary policy measures over here, RBI also gave quick response to the pandemic period, and as the issuer of currency and the custodian of the foreign exchange reserves, Reserve Bank of India also gave a positive response to this kind of pandemic, and to control the money or for the monetary management, RBI gave quick responses. So what are the different provisions made by the RBI in the monetary policy revisions? First of all, the major scheme or major plan that RBI implemented, it was the loan moratorium. So all types of loans and the borrowers of money, they could get the loan moratorium facility, so that for 6 months there was relaxation. So people like me who have taken the loan for property or housing loans, etc., or industrial loans, maybe all of those people, borrowers of money, they could actually get the loan moratorium for 6 months. So it was a relaxation given to them. And apart from the loan moratorium that was given, there was liquidity infusion also. So RBI was literally pouring down money in circulation, so that there won't be any liquidity crunch, which can also have negative spiral in the money market. So to avoid that liquidity crunch, RBI had gone for liquidity infusion. And for the purpose of having this liquidity infusion, RBI reduced the policy rates, right? So it was actually expansionary monetary policy that Central Bank of India, Reserve Bank of India, has adopted. So as a result of this liquidity infusion, there was sufficient liquidity even during the period of lockdown and after the lockdown also. And there were relaxations for the interest payments. So for industrial loans, for long-term loans, interest payment relaxations were given. And the reserve requirements like CRR, cash reserve ratio, then statutory liquidity ratio, all those reserve requirements for commercial banks, those reserve requirements, they were eased out. So for the banking sector and for the money borrowers in general, for both the parties, or for both the participants in the money market as well as capital market in general, RBI had gone for the relaxation kind of thing. So the situation was easy for the people, and then transactions were facilitated as a result of these monetary policy provisions. Therefore, as we see that there were a loan moratorium given and the loan restructuring facility was provided to the people, as a result of that, liquidity crunch did not occur in Indian money market, and that was the success of RBI's monetary policy, that how RBI could handle the situation properly. And we can see that otherwise, because of the inflationary concerns, otherwise RBI does not follow expansionary policy very easily, at least in Indian context. But because of this pandemic and the huge economic losses that we have, it was essential for RBI to go for such kind of expansionary monetary policy. It was really expected, and RBI did the same thing. As a result of these policy measures, there was no liquidity crunch, and there was sufficient liquidity available immediately when the lockdown was gradually lifted up. So then now, if you can just look at the liquidity that is available in Indian markets, it is we have sufficient liquidity available. So because of such sufficient liquidity, the business transactions and the daily capital requirements that are fulfilled. So this is nothing but the success of RBI's policy, due to which we are we were able to overcome the monetary challenges that could have been there as a result of the contractionary policy. So with this, we can see that the policy makers in India, fiscal policy as well as monetary policy, both of them they were very much responsible, and they gave quick responses to the pandemic and the lockdown situation to kind of ease out the situation that will otherwise occur in terms of liquidity crunch and the loss of purchasing power. So this was the policy response given by the fiscal policy maker and the monetary policy maker. Next slide, please. Okay, so now after understanding the kind of response given by the policy makers to control the economic upheaval that could occur in the economy, now I'll come to the point of the vaccine research that is going on. So just to give you the background of how the vaccine research is going on and what are the different angles, different aspects of this vaccine research, like ideological angle, or you can say the policy making kind of dimension. Now I'll be talking about that particular issue. So basically, the outbreak countries, they were really in worry of how to control the COVID cases. So controlling the cases, that was a major concern. And along with that, to control the cases in future, social distancing and maintaining social harmony during that lockdown period, it was also a major concern for the government, because when lockdowns were suddenly imposed, the normal psychology of people, that was changed completely. So that when people are facing this kind of upheaval, when they are facing such disturbances, it was really essential to maintain social harmony during the lockdown period. And we have seen how the Department of Police and other judiciary system and all, they were also disturbed because of this. And to maintain that heavy lockdown of 75 days, we have seen the kind of pressure that our law and police and the order system, it has felt. So maintaining social harmony and security, that was another concern, along with encouraging the clinical research for inventing the vaccine. So when we understand the different fronts on which the government was struggling with this COVID-19 pandemic, uh, as individuals, our response, it was also, it can be also characterized as the panic behavior of the people. And when people were approaching the kind of new norms, like now we have online education and other new normal situation that we have, everybody, and I could say every entity in society, every entity was going through the difficult situation. And when the vaccine research, it comes into the picture, it has to be understood that there are ideological undercurrents in the vaccine research, and we cannot just forget this fact, because every country has got own ideology, and they try to follow that, so that even in the vaccine research, the ideological concerns, they are very much essential and they play their role. So then, when the vaccine research comes into the picture, it is always felt that when something is public, when something is for the public, then the government has to take the whole responsibility. And therefore, even for the speedy invention of the vaccine, it's the government which has to, it's the government authority who has to heavily invest for the vaccine research. So if you look at the worldwide attempts for this kind of vaccine research, of course, there are private institutions which are working for the invention of the vaccine, but they are getting the support from the government authority. And also, it is going to happen that once the vaccine is invented, and it has actually happened in other countries like UK and USA, they have started the vaccination program. But in case of India, it has to happen that once the vaccine is approved by the drug controller, then the social contract has to be made. So with the research, with the successful research on the vaccine, now the government has to make a social contract. Government has to buy the vaccine doses from the private institution, and then it can be given to the public. So that way we can see now that we can now see the chain of transactions over here. So who is investing and who will be benefiting? So we are looking at this vaccine research as a public good. It's not the private good or private commodity anymore. We are now expecting that once the vaccine comes, it will become a public good. Okay, so now then the role of the public investor vaccine, this of these two objectives, that will decide the future of the vaccine distribution in countries like India. The next slide, please. Can we have the next slide? Okay, so then considering the two objectives that we have, there are certain ideological and the political economy aspects and dimensions that are affecting and influencing the vaccine research. So it is always felt that for a country like India, which is looking for the successful invention of the vaccine, especially, here, other countries and the developed countries like UK, USA, they are always pushing their neoliberal agenda, right? And therefore, being the intellectual leaders, when they are pushing their neoliberal agenda, the vaccine research intellectually, it is influenced by these countries. So then how the institutes like Serum Institute or Bharat Biotech, how they will follow the policies and how their distribution policy will be affected by the neoliberal principles, that is very interesting to see. So even though we say that we are a country of democracy and we are a country of freedom, etc., but still the neoliberal agenda which is pushed by the developed countries, that will also have its role to play into that. And of course, though it is neoliberal, it is said, but still these are the capitalist concerns that such countries have. And as a result of those capitalist concerns, what will happen to the mixed economy like India and the vaccine distribution in India, that is another factor to be seen. So on the one hand, we have the intellectual leadership of countries like UK, USA, and their capitalist concerns, neoliberal concerns. And on the other hand, we need international cooperation for the vaccine research, vaccine distribution, and we need to adopt the global approach for the safety of the humanity. So then, when you look at the two sides over here, it is very interesting to see who will win or what kind of ideology and what kind of dimensions will be dominating in the near future. So we all, as I have already mentioned, vaccine is one thing and the regular medicine for COVID-19 is another thing. So right now we are looking for a vaccine that can be for the public, but it always requires international cooperation and a global approach. So whichever country will invent and distribute the vaccine successfully, that country has to cooperate with all others. So whether it will happen, that is really crucial to see. And then whether neoliberal agenda will win or the cooperation principle will win, that is another factor to be seen. So these are some of the dimensions that are influencing the vaccine research and vaccine distribution all over the world. Next slide, please. Okay, so coming to the international scenario, there are four countries that have taken lead in the vaccine research, like UK, USA, there's Russia, and India as well. And all these countries are looking for the first mover advantage. Now, it is the concept that comes from economics, which says that for any invention, the first mover or the successor in this particular field will get lot of advantages. So the target for these leading countries is to get the first mover advantage. So the one who will win the race will be benefited a lot out of all the success that the one who has got. Therefore, this first mover advantage is the target of all such countries when they will start the vaccination. So there are domestic concerns and international pressure both for the speedy invention of the vaccine, and it is influenced by the deadly combination of the economic adversity and the risk of life. So as we all know, because of this COVID-19, we have lost many lives. And along with that, because of the lockdowns, we have the economic adversity also. So because of these two pressures, we are actually in dire need of having a successful invention of the vaccine. So then, on the one hand, there is economic adversity, there's a risk of life, and also the capitalist mercantile orientation that is also seen when the vaccine research is talked about. But actually, the question over here is whether the voice of the vulnerable people will be heard or not. So, who is actually in need of such vaccine? What kind of people, what kind of section of the society is more vulnerable to this kind of this kind of disease, and then who are actually the needy people, that has to be identified first. So apart from the market forces that are dominating the discourse, apart from those market forces, it is really very essential to hear the voice of the vulnerable people. So we need to think of the poorest of the poor people, those who do not get such medical facilities otherwise, because they don't have mediclaim, they don't have the life insurance policies. So these people, they need to be prioritized when we are thinking of the vaccine, when we are thinking of the vaccine distribution in India. If you can just excuse me, I'll get my charger and I'll put my laptop on charger.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself. You're not audible. Hello. Aparna,
Yes.
ma'am, you're not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So my whole argument over here is that we have experienced that the vaccine research is driven by ideologies more than the economic as well as the medical facts. And when ideologies start playing their role, it becomes very difficult to have the kind of unbiased and impartial treatment to the vaccine researchers. So therefore, rather than ideologies, it is essential to look at the facts that we have. So then economic priorities should not be there.
Excuse me, ma'am. So sorry to interrupt you. But the host is requesting you to please conclude your talk within 5 minutes.
Yes, yes, ma'am, please.
Okay, thank you.
So the so apart from ideologies, there should not be but the facts and the need that has to be taken very seriously, and the capitalist orientation which is overruling the indigeneity and the social justice, that should be avoided. So considering the vaccine research that is going on and also the distribution that we are expecting in India, uh, it involves a lot of political factors internationally and the issues like social justice domestically. So the capitalist concerns and priorities that we have, they should not be emphasized, but the humanitarian approach should be emphasized more. So this is my whole argument, and I expect that when we will have the vaccination in India, we should be able to take care of the needs of poorest of the poor people, those who do not get access to the medical facilities as such, and those who do not have access to the high funda medical facilities which our country has. So then, actually, there is a good news from India that there are three leading institutes which are continuously researching on this vaccine research, and it is also possible that this will have a lot of international cooperation and international collaboration when the vaccine research will become successful. So the manufacturing of the vaccine and distribution both are taken up seriously by the government, and in near future we will be able to have actual vaccination program that the government of India is supposed to launch. So the cost advantage, easy storage, affordability, have those boost and effectiveness all across the age groups, indigeneity are some of the advantages of the vaccine research and the vaccines, the successful vaccine that India is going to have. So with these advantages, we expect that these researchers who are researching in the field of COVID-19 vaccine, they will be successful and they will be benefiting the entire society with all such angles. And then at last, what we need to have, what we actually are expecting, is a proper social contract between the government and the vaccine researchers, so that we will be able to get through this. For that, what we need is a preparedness and clarity at the state level, because here the main mover is the central government, but then the state governments, they do not have clarity, and there is a lot of confusion also, and state governments do not have the access to the resources as well. So then preparedness and clarity at the state level is very much important. But unfortunately, in most of the cases, the center-state relations are disturbed. We do not have many state governments where there is a center-state cooperation, or that spirit of cooperation is lacking. So if such kind of relations, disturbed center and state relations are there, then I doubt whether we can have a successful vaccination program or not. So therefore, these relations should also be concerned. And then there has to be consensus on vaccine distribution, both at state level as well as the central level. Apart from, except the electoral priorities that the government has and the political opportunism, we should avoid that, and we should rather focus on social justice and economic equality. That should be our top priority. So yeah, with this conclusion, I have actually talked about the challenges that we have political economy challenges before the vaccine research and the vaccine distribution. So this is the whole argument that I have. So I very much I'm very much thankful to Dr. Vikram Jena, who invited me, and Professor Rudra, who has coordinated the entire session. So if you have any question, I'm open to the question answers.
Yes, ma'am. We will have the question answer session last part.
Okay.
But ma'am, for enlightening us with an overview of the political economic perspective amidst the pandemic, thanks a lot again. Now I'd like to invite Professor Sreenivasulu to please initiate his talk. Over to Sreenivasulu, sir. May I request Mr. Sreenivasulu to please initiate?
Yeah, it was now it's on board. Yeah, thank you, Professor Gary, Professor Kulkarni, for speaking on the history of pandemic and as well on the economic concerns regarding vaccine research and development. So after history and economics, it's the time for law, because law will always come afterwards of any social movement, social development, or economic development. Law follows history, law follows economics, right? Also in the current session, law is again following both the history of pandemic as presented by Professor Gary, and the economic analysis of vaccine research and development in the context of COVID-19. So let me give you my legal views, legal perspective with respect to the current pandemic of COVID-19, and as well legal perspectives with respect to the COVID-19 vaccine research and innovation. In fact, I have titled my talk as the public health concerns involved in the current pandemic of COVID-19 and governance perspectives. How exactly Government of India is going about addressing the concerns of public health in the context of this current pandemic of COVID-19, and how exactly government is going about encouraging, promoting, incentivizing, or rewarding vaccine research and innovation for the purpose of the COVID-19, right? So the as Professor Gary highlighted regarding the history of pandemic, the history of pandemic of this current COVID vaccine may be having some historical perceptions, but as far as law is concerned, the law is always looking at this COVID-19 as a menace concerning health. How to ensure public health of the people in the onslaught of COVID-19 happens to be always a concern for governance, for ensuring public health, because health and public health security happens to be the subject matters of both the national government and as well state government. So there is a requirement of a coordination between and among us, the national government and the state governments concerning ensuring public health in the context of COVID-19. So as far as public health is concerned, we have some legal jurisprudence at international level and as well national level, because I have different scholars from different continents here, from Australia and also from Uzbekistan, Professor Gary. Let me take them also into confidence that as far as international law is concerned, different continents such as Australia, such as European Union, or such as USA have got their own stake, their own concerns, or their own contribution. For example, European Union happens to be the first continent or first region which happens to figure out an exclusive convention with respect to legal convention with respect to ensuring public health. You have a European Union Convention on the biomedicine, European Union Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine, with reference to using biological resources, biochemical resources, and vaccination or virology kind of researches for the purpose of ensuring public health. In that scenario, European Union happens to be the first region or jurisdiction as such continent which happened to roll down a particular type of international legal text concerning ensuring public health in the backdrop of pandemics, which is not confined to just COVID, but any pandemic in general. And as far as the COVID-19 is concerned, the European Union happens to be the first continent, for that matter, to have come out with special guidelines for the purpose of ensuring public health in the context of COVID-19. And perhaps the WHO, World Health Organization's concerns regarding COVID-19 happens to take a serious talk because of the fact that the current president of USA happens to cut the USA's ties with WHO, because saying that the WHO could not do enough to control this current pandemic of COVID-19, or WHO knowingly very well that the current pandemic is coming from a particular nation or a particular country, it could not give message, or it could not warn, or it could not control that particular country, or it could not caution the other nations. In fact, the current president was going on and on in saying that it is because of the failure of a World Health Organization in particular, the reason why these many people are suffering with the current COVID scenario. The pandemic spread is basically because of WHO, because of its inability in cautioning, in controlling the number of nations. That is the reason, as said by the current president of USA. That may or may not be true, but still it gives an understanding to us that as far as pandemics like COVID are concerned, the role of WHO is very, very inevitable. The role of WHO is very significant, because as far as health is concerned, international health is concerned, public health is concerned, being the apex body, World Health Organization, WHO is supposed to do certain things, or it should have done certain things, as not completely assured by the USA, but as assured by all the 215 countries. Never in the history of the mankind that a particular pandemic has spread across all the 215 nations, right? I believe Professor Gary would agree with me that never in the history of mankind this kind of pandemic we have ever seen. We have seen plague, we have seen number of such Russian flu and number of such other pandemics, but this COVID-19 happens to be that pandemic which has not left any single corner of the world, which has not left any single individual in this world. All the 750 crores of population, 215 nations are actually suffering from this current pandemic. So that is the magnanimity. That is the magnanimity of this current pandemic. That may be the reason why people like American president happens to shout at WHO, World Health Organization, that you should have taken certain precautions, having known very well the kind of pandemic that COVID-19 is going to be in this scenario in which it got spread across the world. Nevertheless, it gives us an understanding that as far as the public health is concerned, in the backdrop of current pandemics like COVID-19, the role of apex body, international apex body like WHO, should have been better, should have been even broader with respect to, if not supplying any vaccine, or if not encouraging any development of vaccine, at least giving information. Information is important. The lack of information with respect to what is happening in which part of the world, right? Which type of virus is spreading in which part of the world, that happens to be the problem in knowing about this current pandemic and in controlling this current pandemic. People started working on vaccine development of late, but the COVID-19 started spreading across the globe 1.5 years back, right? Almost 1 year, people were clueless with respect to what type of pandemic it is, where from it is spreading, and what is the caution, and what is the reason for this kind of pandemic virus, right? That's the reason why people started, our laboratories, universities, organizations started researching on development of vaccine very, very late. Maybe aftermath of say July, August in the current year, people started working on the vaccine. But the pandemic of COVID-19 started spreading in the last year, middle of the last year itself, right? So what was happening for that one long year? Who happened to fail? Whose responsibility was this? As far as international law is concerned, as far as the governance is concerned, so people have failed here. The apex body like a World Health Organization has failed. The nations have failed in taking precautions. Nations have failed in taking precautions. That's why nations have gone about imposing lockdown. Imposing lockdown may not be a solution, but it is an attempt to only stop the spreading of the current pandemic. So it was also considered to be part of governance, but that governance is not giving you result. The kind of governance that you are supposed to have is to find solution, not to control yourself, not to hide yourself, right? Lockdown is nothing but controlling the human, moving around, and you are actually trying to hide yourself in your households. But that may not be the solution. But you will have to work out some vaccine, and that vaccine working out or development production started too late because nobody was having any clue about it. So whom to blame for in this kind of scenario where we are having a pandemic, which is not only because of the non-performance or not giving information by few people, but as well the serious lack of governance is there as far as ensuring public health is concerned, if not through the letter of the law, but at least through the cautions and precautions that the people, nations, the government should have taken in this current scenario of COVID-19. That's the reason why maybe people like a US president have gone about, questioning World Health Organization and such institutions as such. But nations, all the nations have failed as such in controlling, in governing, in ensuring a proper governance for this current kind of pandemic. When I say controlling, regulating, and governance, these are three different aspects. Controlling you have done by lockdown. Regulating you are trying to do now by imposing some limitations with respect to the privatization, economic bringing in economic viability of the vaccine. But governance is beyond that. Governance is ensuring proper supply of information, ensuring proper precautions, or developing the vaccine, supplying the vaccine, prescribing code of conduct, talking about public health legislations, bringing them on. So all these things put together, you talk about governance as such, right? So governance is a big thing. It's not just confined to imposing lockdown. It's not just confined to bringing about a particular vaccine. It's about ensuring the fullest, complete public health security, right? Ensuring public health security, not just ensuring public health, but securing the same. How can you ensure public health? Maybe by supplying some vaccine you can ensure. But what about the performance of that vaccine? What about the suitability of that vaccine? How about the adaptability of your own biochemicals with respect to that vaccine? How about bringing it in the generic form? How to supply it to everybody? All these things put together, you talk about security. So what we need today is public security, not just public health. Whether the governments have gained success in doing that is a big question. In the current context of COVID pandemic, it is in the current COVID context, the nations have overwhelmingly failed in controlling, not just controlling the COVID vaccines spreading across the globe, but as well in preparing the society, in preparing the public masses with respect to ensuring that they are fine and safe from this pandemic of COVID. There are nations like India which talk about their own customized traditional setup with respect to fighting this kind of pandemics, saying that the Ayurvedic kind of medicine or the lifestyles of the people in India is to an extent sufficient to fight out against the current pandemic of COVID. But that is there as part of the social tradition and custom that you could not bring it on to be useful across the globe. But people at the realm of affairs that the central government say that at least 50 to 60 nations have demanded, have asked, requested for the supply of the Indian traditional, aboriginal or Ayurvedic kind of medicinal value-oriented products for the purpose of developing COVID-related vaccine. Or 50 odd countries have actually asked the government of India to let them know how exactly the Indian traditional herbs or Indian Ayurvedic stuff is useful in increasing resistance power in the masses, because increasing resistance power is the big thing to ensure public health. It may be the COVID pandemic, or it may be Spanish virus, or whatever it could be. At the end of the day, as far as public health is concerned, one thing we will have to remember is that you should have resistance power. The public should have resistance power. The people like you and me should have resistance power, and that resistance power should be within us, inside our bodies. How to increase that? You may call it as resistance power, or you may call it as immunity. Self-generated, your own body-generated immunity. If you are having immunity, if you are having resistance power, you have the better compatibility to resist or withstand with this kind of viruses, COVID and all that. So that being the story, how to increase, how to ensure the increase of the resistance power, immunity in the bodies of people. That is the basic thing that we have to ensure for the purpose of ensuring public health. And as a matter of governance, as a matter of the role that the state and law should play in ensuring proper governance for ensuring public health during the current type of pandemics, is to ensure that the masses are having the proper resistance power, immunity power. First of all, we need to work on that. If people are talking about vaccine. That just vaccine is not sufficient. Can you ensure that any particular type of vaccine is going to completely give you the solution? Can you tell me that the same vaccine is suitable for the an old person who is of 90 years and a small kid who is of 9 months? Can you guarantee me that the same vaccine is suitable for African, American, Indian, and South African with a different type of genetic makeup and genetic setup? So no guarantee, right? That's why vaccine development is not a joke. People say that we are developing vaccine, and India also in Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, and Pune, our own Prime Minister happened to visit and happened to oversee how the vaccine development is taking place. Let me know. I am asking and appealing to all the scientific community here. Can you people guarantee that whatever vaccine that you are developing in your own laboratory, in your own country, is going to be suitable for one and all the 750 crores of population that we are having today? I'm asking the same question to our laboratories in Hyderabad, Pune, and Ahmedabad, that are you going to develop the same kind of vaccine that is going to be suitable for 133 crores of population in this country? I'm again asking the scientific community that whether any vaccine that we are going to develop is going to be suitable for across the different age groups, different gender groups, or different ethnic groups. No guarantee. That's why the public health is very, very important, because it is not just concerning development of vaccine. It is concerning ensuring proper, appropriate public health and security. How you can do that? Right? You develop your own biological structure, you develop immunity, you develop resistance power. Not only this current pandemic of COVID, even when you talk about cancer, when you talk about HIV, all these diseases are nothing but which are connected with your resistance power. For example, I will give you HIV. What is HIV? Immunodeficiency syndrome. You have a deficiency regarding your immunity, you have deficiency regarding your resistance power. That's the reason why you have AIDS. Same is now here. This current pandemic of COVID is also connected with flu, cough, and all. We have seen number of flus and coughs. Why we are fearing more about this? Because you are losing gradually. Human being is losing gradually resistance power. You are unable to withstand with the nature. You are going on and on by challenging the natural habitat, natural euphoria, and you are now becoming vulnerable to the same nature. You have disturbed the nature. You happen to go on and on in exploiting the nature, right? Damaging the nature. Now the nature is giving back. You are unable to sustain. You are unable to withstand. You are losing your resistance power. You are losing your immunity power. So the basic thing that our own scientists and technocrats, everybody like you and me who are party to this discussion, they will have to think about is how to improve your resistance power, how to improve your immune deficiency. Otherwise, you will be affected with HIV/AIDS or this COVID kind of vaccine, or number of vaccine, number of pandemics, number of viruses. So public health concern is this. Governance concern should be this, not just supplying a particular vaccine, right? When we talk about the role of the state, role of the law for ensuring public health and security through governance, that governance is not just confined to initiating or sanctioning some fund for the purpose of developing a vaccine. I don't believe in that. Governance is all about ensuring public health and security, and which is beyond developing a particular vaccine. Right? As the history of pandemic say, every pandemic comes out in its own way, and then that becomes a challenge, and as well it's an opportunity for the health sector people and as well government. To health sector people, opportunity in the sense they should be in a position to come out with a new vaccine, new pharma, or a new medical method. And governance people, for them it is an opportunity, because they will have to come out with certain new innovative and creative governance figures. right? Similarly, COVID-19 has also thrown open a challenge and as well opportunity. Challenges for everybody to how to test out, how to ensure their own resistance power, their own immunity power, and an opportunity for the health sector people to come out with a new vaccine or new medicinal method, and for the government circles to ensure how exactly the pandemic can be governed. It's not just about controlling, it's not just about regulating, but it's about governing. And that governance involves ensuring public health and security. And that ensuring public health and security is not just confined to thinking about a particular vaccine, which is whether it is going to be successful or not, nobody knows. So every one of us will have to think in terms of strengthening ourselves, increasing our immunity, increasing our resistance power, so that not only this current kind of pandemic, but any kind of disease, any kind of virus for that matter, we can withstand and survive. We all know that whenever we are weak, we get to see number of other ailments that our body is suffering from. Whenever we are strong mentally and physically, nothing will happen to us. So it's a simple funda that we have to keep ourselves safe, secure, having good resistance power, having good immunity power. And this aspect nobody is talking about. I'm sorry to say nobody is talking about this. Everybody, all the 215 countries are talking about vaccine, virus, vaccine, virus, vaccine. Virus is spreading because of your low resistance power, your low immunity power. You are demanding some one shot, in one stroke you want to eliminate virus. Do you think that with vaccination this virus is going to go away? No. Vaccination is like using this spray. In case of any pain, our football players, soccer players will, for immediate relief, they will use spray, which will only kill that particular pain or ailment, disturbance for a while, and afterwards of that it will again recon back. And only you can kill that, only you can stop that when you are actually able to increase your immunity and resistance power. So as a matter of public health concern, I consider that this COVID pandemic, which is which happened to spread across all the 215 countries, which has thrown a very, very big challenge that we never heard of, and it is a real serious opportunity for one and all to actually introspect and think, not just confined to developing a vaccine. Think about how to strengthen yourself biologically, how to strengthen yourself in terms of increasing your resistance power, how to increase your immunity power, change your lifestyle, right? Change your habits, change your eating stuff, right? Try to control your own, nature around. Keep your nature clean, keep your house clean, right? Talk about all these things. Why nobody is talking about all these things? Don't you think that these things have got to play a big role in increasing your resistance power, your immunity power, and because of which you can generate in your own body the power to withstand, resist any kind of disease, virus, right? So human being he's a multicellular organism, right? Multicellular organism. Lakhs and billions of cells are there in our body. And this virus is single-celled organism, right? This virus is a single-celled organism. And you have millions of cells in your body. See, the euphoria, the body which is having billions of cells is actually frightened, fearing of a single cell, which is called as a virus. That is because your body is losing resistance power. So I take this COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity for reinterrogating ourselves, introspecting ourselves with respect to ensuring public health and security. It's a check, it's a question, it's a challenge, and as well opportunity for the government to ensure that the proper governance of health of the people is the need of the hour. Proper governance of health of the people is the need of the hour, and for that you need to ensure health security, and by ensuring health security you will have the opportunity, possibility and feasibility to control this kind of pandemics like COVID-19, so on and so forth. Very recently, the Indian Prime Minister happened to write to or appeal to pitch to WTO for relaxing intellectual property rights concerning COVID-19 related vaccine. Of course, South Africa also seconded it, saying that because of the widespread nature of this current pandemic across all the 215 countries, intellectual property rights or conferment of patents on vaccines should be stopped, should be suspended, so that the COVID-19 vaccine is available at for the masses across at a generic level. But WTO has not taken a call yet, because WTO is all about trade related aspects. Economic aspects are looked into because people must be pouring a lot of money into developing vaccine. The corporations are the big pharma companies like Novartis, Reddy's Laboratories, Serum Institute, like that, right? They want to get back their investment. So WTO will have to look into, World Trade Organization will have to look into all these economic aspects, but India and South Africa happen to propose before the WTO for suspension of intellectual property rights, suspension of patent rights with respect to COVID-19 vaccine for ensuring public health and security. And in fact, the Doha Declaration of the World Trade Organization also talks about ensuring public health while balancing the same with intellectual property rights. The Doha Declaration says, in case of any public exigency, public emergency for ensuring public health and public health security, it is possible to flex muscles. It is possible to relax intellectual property rights for the purpose of ensuring addressing that particular public emergency. It's called Doha Declaration. You have a Helsinki Declaration also regarding medicine, public health and medicine, where it says that member nations will have to coordinate, put their efforts together for the purpose of ensuring public health and security across the globe. Right? You take United Nations Convention on Human Rights and Human Genome. You take United Nations Convention on the Human Rights, or European Union Convention on Human Genome and Biomedicine. All these conventions, international law on the point of public health, talk about international coordination, international cooperation, including regional level coordination and cooperation for the purpose of ensuring public health and security. And as a matter of fact, supplying of vaccine with respect to COVID-19 or ensuring public health and security across the globe is not going to be possible without coordination and cooperation from among us the people. Now, 1 year back, we never had cooperation across the globe. That's the reason why this virus got spread across. Otherwise, if we had supply of any proper information, or if there would have been a cooperation and coordination, this pandemic or this virus would not have spread across all the 215 countries, right? So lack of cooperation among us international society, lack of coordination among us the nations is the reason for this widespread of this particular vaccine. Now, if you want to control it and ensure public health and security, you need to solicit international cooperation as assured by the various international conventions talking about public health and security, because public health cannot be guaranteed by any one individual, one hospital, one laboratory, one doctor, or one country. It's a matter of public concern. When it is a public concern, it means international global concern. Now, in the current scenario of COVID-19, which is the pandemic having, serious global concerns having spread across the globe, now every country will have to cooperate and coordinate, not just in coming out with the vaccine, but supplying that vaccine to one and all people at large, one and all the countries, and as well giving information, soliciting information, and as well coordinating and giving the kind of support for one and all, not just confining to their own countries, but keeping in mind other countries, other nations' concerns as well. Only then you can ensure public health. So public health is not just, public health law or governance is not going to be done from your local level, right? Its execution will only be done at local level. Public health security in the current wake of COVID-19 can only be ensured through the international level. That's the reason why WHO, World Health Organization, role is very, very vital here. That's the reason why people are talking about World Trade Organization, United Nations, or for that matter, Intellectual Property Rights Organization, or such other international organizations, because those organizations' voice, those organizations' guidelines will have impact across the globe. So it's the high time that this kind of international organizations should take all the nations into confidence and ensure that all the nations cooperate and coordinate, not just in terms of developing a particular vaccine, but as well in ensuring public health and security for the masses across the globe. So don't just confine to talking about or developing a vaccine, but talk about how to increase immunity power, resistance power among us, the masses, how to ensure public health, and how to secure that for uniform and stable purposes, uniform across the different ethnic population, and stable across the time, right? What that actually I mean to say with uniformity and stability. So how to ensure that? All these things are the concerns that the current governance structure at international level and as well national level is having in the current COVID-19 scenario. So as a legal scholar, as a person from the field of law, I would like to say that controlling any kind of pandemic like COVID is not just going to be done through just the lens of law. It requires serious social coordination. It requires serious economic cooperation. It requires serious political will. It also requires historical knowledge and as well international cooperation. Without that, no law for that matter can be effectively executed, and law in isolation cannot ensure any kind of public health. State in isolation cannot ensure any public health and cannot ensure security, especially in the context of COVID-19 scenario. So my appeal, my argument, my thesis is that to ensure public health and security in the context of COVID-19, it's a big challenge for the state, big challenge for the law circles, and a big challenge for governance, and where support, assistance, coordination is required from each and every angle. Legal circles, political circles, economic cooperation, social coordination, and international cooperation is a must for controlling COVID-19, for supplying COVID-19 related vaccine, and for ensuring public health and security across the globe. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Professor Sreenivasulu, for your excellent deliberation on the said topic. Thanks a lot again. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Shubham Das to now I'd like
Hello. If someone have some questions, then please ask directly Professor Sreenivasulu and to Professor Kulkarni. Okay, I hope there is no questions from our sides. Then we have to go to close our sessions. Okay. Very good afternoon to all. It's my immense pleasure to go for a formal vote of thanks for this session. First of all, I would like to thank our esteemed Professor Gary and Professor Sreenivasulu and Professor Kulkarni for their thought-provoking deliberation on their said topics. I extend my hearty thanks to Dr. Zena, Director Card, and Chinmay Sahu, the Executive Director Card, for their friendly cooperation. I would like to express my profound gratitude to Principal Professor Pallab Chakrabarti for their cooperation in organizing this webinar. I would like to thank our convener, Professor Sarat Pradhan, and the co-convener, Professor Shubham Das, co-coordinator Payal Agarwal and Bajaj Das for their support and guidance to organize this event. I'm happy to express the vote of thanks to all participants, including academicians, students, media persons, civil society members who have made this webinar a grand success by sparing their valuable time with us. Our next session is at 4 p.m. today, and feedback link for the certificate will be provided in our evening session. Thank you. The meeting is concluded now.